Chris, if you're capturing mainly business cards, are you doing any sort of qualification along with the taking a picture of the card, like in terms of what product they might be interested in or things like that?
There's a theoretical answer and a real world answer to that. But the theoretical answer is, yeah, absolutely. We would never take someone's business card without having a lengthy conversation to make sure that there's a real opportunity there. The real world answer is it completely depends on the conversation. We know two ways about it. One of the big reasons we attend expos is lead generation. So there's always a push on get as many contacts, as many cards, as many follow-ups as you can. Just play that numbers game. But you realize pretty quickly that the best reps are the ones that actually take a minute to have a conversation with someone relatively quickly. The ones who can do this quickly are a joy to behold on that.
What's up, networkers? Welcome back to another episode of the Networker Podcast, your home for all the best insights and advice on all things conferences, trade shows, and networking.
We're your hosts, Bryce Alston and Ryan Alco. Join us as we network with events industry professionals to discuss the art of building meaningful connections that fuel your business growth and unlock opportunity.
Now, without further ado, put on your conference badge and let's dive in to today's episode.
This week on the Networker Podcast, we're joined by Chris Colquitt, Director of Strategic Development at Orbis Protect and a PhD at the University of Chester in the United Kingdom, where he's focused on business psychology and organizational management. With deep expertise in event strategy and business development, Chris breaks down how he approaches conferences as individual campaigns, anchored in preparation, precision, and purpose. We dive into the evolving role of lead capture, the power of tools like Popl, and why tracking handshakes might just be the most underrated move in your marketing toolkit. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
Chris, welcome to the Networker Podcast. We're super excited to have you on today and chat with you and learn from you about how your team succeeds with managing leads from your event process, starting from the pre-event process all the way through to the post-event follow-up. It's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So to kick things off, we understand that conferences and trade shows, they vary significantly from industry to industry. Some industries have a bunch of large ones throughout the year. Some typically have many, many smaller ones. Tell us kind of the lay of the land of your industry and the conferences that your team goes to.
We do a bit of both. And honestly, it can be quite dynamic as well. It can change from year to year. We still sort of find for some periods it feels like it makes sense to do the large shows. Some periods it feels like it makes sense to not do the large shows and go local or smaller as well. So I think not just getting the feel for the large and small, part of what we need to do is sort of just take the temperature on whether we should be doing large this year or small this year or a mix this year. It feels like it's always changing. We typically do 2 to 3 sort of large trade shows or expos or events per year. That's where we'd be like on a stand, reach out to people we know, but also take advantage of the large number of people coming in to try and visit and try and grab people on the stand during it. But one of the big things we've always struggled with is tying that up with just day-to-day business development as well, because I think a lot of companies really separate a sales rep being out and sitting down for lunch with someone. That's then completely separate workflow from meeting someone on a stand at an expo. But it's kind of just all relationship management, and we've always looked for something that can kind of bring the relationship management into one workflow instead. Splitting it between large event and informal lunch has just always felt a little bit arbitrary from our side of things. So yeah, we do that sort of 3 or 4 large trade show a year, and that can go up and down. But we're always keen to try and tie that in with smaller, more regional events, and then also being aware that our reps are just out on the road, meeting people and meeting existing customers. One for us is always trying to make sure that we can track our existing customer meetings in with our new business development as well, because it's just all shades of business development, and finding processes to properly reflect on all of that has always felt a little challenging, but the right direction to try and take.
Yeah, so that makes sense in that you're going to a bunch of different events, large, small conferences, or even outside of those. Ideally, you want a tool that can sort of standardize those interactions across the board. that your salespeople can use just one platform that allows them to manage new relationships, but also existing?
We want to track handshakes. Ultimately, like for us, like if we look at it as a lead funnel, like all opportunities start with a conversation or a handshake somewhere. It's just who those conversations and who those handshakes are between. Is it new people meeting for the first time over an expo desk? Or is it an account manager and a customer that have been working together for a decade, like sitting down at a regular account management review? It's all just part of the start into that opportunity journey for us. And yeah, we've always looked for a tool or a system to try and be able to capture the differences in that, but to keep it in the same envelope.
Got it. So going back to the conferences that your team is specifically attending, you said 2 to 3 big ones. Are those generally the same 2 to 3 every year? Do they vary? How do you select those?
Prior success plays a big part of it. Like where we've had expos that we've visited in the past and they have produced a good throughput of opportunities. Like we're far more likely to go back to that. But we do always test the water with new expos. We always try and find new places to be. We've grown really rapidly as a company over the last 5 years. So actually, we've entered a lot of new industries. We've brought in a lot of new products and services to market as well. So we do see quite a lot of new entrants into our sort of expo list. There are some large standard industry expos. There's one in Birmingham, one in London that we're at pretty much every year. That it's kind of expected that we're there, but we also see quite a lot of fringe ones where, yeah, we've brought a new product or service to market, or we've entered a new industry, and we kind of need to raise profile in that as well. So I'd say out of the 2 or 3 large expos that we visit every year, probably one of those will be consistent on like maybe a 4 or 5 year rolling platform. And then out of the remaining 2, like one may be consistent and then one's probably new in that. Looking for the next consistent, successful one.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And it makes sense that given that you guys are expanding industries and expanding products, that you would be also changing the conferences you're attending while keeping some of them consistent. I totally get that. Let's dive into that and say that, okay, you got a conference coming up. Walk us through the planning and the preparation that your team does going into that event.
Yeah, we've spent a long time refining on this, actually. For us, expo and conference preparation starts about 12 months before the actual expo itself. So we have a really long pre-tail. We like to leave as little as possible to chance for our expos when we get there. We've been through periods in the past where we've kind of just rocked up and there's just no clear way of budgeting effectively. Like we can't give any reassurances to senior management on how effective the expo is actually going to be. So we pull about 12 months in advance. Realistically, that actually fits with our marketing workflow. Like to actually get a stand put together, to identify and arrange a team. Frankly, it takes 6 months to date just to actually make the expo happen a lot of the time. So we see those two running in parallel. But as I say, we like to try and remove attendees from chance. So 6 months out, we'll start going through marketing database. We'll go through previous attendees at other expos. We'll go through existing customers and asking existing customers for referrals to try and get people on stand. And we'll start building an attendee database for our salespeople that we know that are sending to the expo to say, look, guys, this is who we're expecting. Your job over the next 6 months is now to try and warm up and try and get confirmation. Not just that they're going to come and see us on stand, but that ideally the conversation's going to go somewhere. The monkeys and typewriters approach doesn't work great for us. Like we've run expos in the past where we've sort of put it back up and said, right, for every sale, we need 5 quotes. And for every quote, we need 5 conversations. And for every conversation, we need 20 leads. And we tried putting it out to salespeople and saying, right, to close our 25 opportunities this session, we're going to need 2,500 handshakes over the expo. And salespeople just look at us like with mouths agape. It's just an insane amount of activity. So we work quite closely with them to say, look, you can play those numbers. You know, the more you're in touch with these customers in advance, the more you're coaching them to come and visit us on stand, the more you're actually having them on stand at the end of that conversation. You know, we've got 3 sites ready to go with you. Come and see us on stand. We'll get everything finalized. We can do DocuSign signatures on stand, that sort of thing. The more it's at the tail end of the conversation, the more we're definitely closing business at that expo. Whereas I think we've been through that sort of experience of trying to use expos more for lead generation. It's just such a huge amount of activity to produce such a variable output at that point. So we do a lot of target identification at that front end of the 6 months, but we try and do a huge amount of coaching with the salespeople and opportunity development in that 6 months, so that it's not just like the first touch point when we're on expo. It's more towards the tail end of the opportunity.
Yeah, makes sense. Chris, I think one of the side effects of this episode is Ryan and I are going to get a lesson in British terminology here. You're saying stand. I assume that's like the American equivalent of booth. Is that
Yeah,
what?
exactly that.
Come
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
booth.
Yeah, absolutely. Booth, I don't know why. I guess booth for me always has very specific connotations that like you've got something over your head and
Yeah.
lights on, and that just doesn't describe the stands that we run. We tend to do much more open plan. Main benefit there, obviously, with open plan is that you can be approached from 360 degrees. But yeah, stand booth, exactly the same thing.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. Well, that aside, thanks for that lesson. I'm curious. So you're talking about merging your efforts throughout the year in preparation for conferences, and there seems to be blurred lines between like when a conference really ends and begins and what additional efforts go into it. You have reps meeting with clients off site and you're measuring these handshakes, whether it's the first handshake, the second handshake, etc. Can you talk about the tools that you're using to manage all of this and give, I assume, you the high level view of all of this activity and how it rolls up at the end of the day?
Yeah, so it's our chief marketing officer. I interim ran our marketing team for about 12, 18 months. I've just stepped away. We've got a new chief marketing officer, director of marketing in place at the moment. But yeah, it's that visibility, right? That reporting line. And you make a really good point there about the blurred lines of like tracking and reporting on events. That is such an old conversation for us. It's like old as when time began, that if you shake someone's hand at an event, does that mean that every opportunity you ever develop with that person is attributable to that event? Or do you limit it to 12 months? Or, you know, what if you shook their hand for the first time at the event as opposed to the 50th time? And it's so hard, right, to try and nail all that down. And I'd go further than so hard. It's almost like pointless. It's just needlessly theoretical, right? You're just looking for this line in the sand. So
That's
yeah,
what's going on your whiteboard, huh?
yeah, 100%.
The equation trying to
Yeah,
the
well,
attribution equation.
even more than that, I'm studying a PhD in this at the moment, and it is literally looking at like complex systems in business capture. And it's this idea that we love the idea of building block models on things, but the real world hates block models, right? It just doesn't have lines drawn around things. It thrives on complexity rather than simplicity. So yeah, we tie in. We currently have both HubSpot and Pardo in as CRMs. So we need a tool that, like I say, not just, we did it with spreadsheets many years ago, and spreadsheets take that really simplistic approach well, right? We met 70 people at this expo, and if you're really clever, you can tie it together and go back to your spreadsheet in 6 months and say, right, out of these 70 people, this is how many opportunities closed, and these are the accounts. But it's always really point in time. It doesn't have that granularity that I mentioned of, well, actually this name's on here, but that name's also in like the 10 previous events that we've been to. You know, the next 3, it's going to be on there as well, and we just see them all the time. And even then, there's a difference in meeting someone 13 times. One person you can meet 13 times and you never get a damn penny from them, and one person you meet 13 times and they're one of your best customers. No way of tracking that granularity. So we work very heavily with our sales CRM. We run Salesforce internally, and as I mentioned, we've got both Pardo and HubSpot running for different reasons, and we've used Popl for the last year to try and track. And one of the things we've really enjoyed about that, and we would dead keen to push this out to our account managers is to say you've got to be tracking every interaction, right? Every time you meet with someone, it's that idea of tracking handshakes. It's a digital handshake, right? You're not exchanging business cards. That's kind of a first time meeting someone event, is that you exchange business cards. Whereas, yeah, if you're at an account management meeting and you've been at that meeting every month for the last 4 years, still track it, right? You've still shook hands at the beginning of the meeting or whatever your equivalent is. You need to track it, because we can confidently say the people that we meet more and that we interact with more turn into our best customers. And it's also not a split thing. Our best customers continue to be our best customers because we meet with them more at that point. It doesn't stop once someone becomes a customer. So we found getting people out of this exchanging business cards mentality and more into this tracking handshakes mentality was really beneficial, because again, it ties into those back-end systems, Salesforce, HubSpot, Pardo, bunch of others, to start showing how those relationships are developing over time. It's very clear to track. You lose a customer or you lose an account, and it turns out it's because the customer contact has gone somewhere else. The correlation is always huge, but that single event tracking, that spreadsheet approach never works well for putting that complexity in. So, yeah, we've used Popl to tie in with a bunch of those CRMs over the last 12, 18 months. And we found that record, right? Updating HubSpot actually was really good at this, that we had it set up in a workflow at the background that every time someone tapped a Popl on a name, like it increased their marketing engagement score by 10 points. And then if they hadn't had any interactions for, I think it was 6 months, it decreased their score by 10 points at that point. And 10 was mid-range, right? With like anyone actually signing an opportunity with us got 100 points at that point, right? But just being in the same room as someone and shaking hands, it's really important to track how often that's happening. And that for us worked really well on some of these systems.
So it's really interesting for you to talk about Popl sort of like a touch point tracker rather than that tool. Okay, you may be using it to capture those initial interactions, but it's something that you use to capture those interactions over time. And the scoring, the points that you're talking about are also really interesting. Are those native to HubSpot? Is that out of the box, or is that something that you built in as a way to help track?
They brought it in, I think, last year. I think they brought scoring in last year, and I suspect they wanted to bring it in for a very long time. It was such a common sense inclusion when they put it in, because I guess the thing about marketing is not just the people that are complex, but it's the ways that you reach out to them, right? And you've got to remember that these are always a real person in the real world that is receiving an email from you one day and then maybe doing business with you another day and then being at the same event as you another day. And so many of these companies have account management running completely separate from the day-to-day outgoing marketing activities of sending emails or socials out. And then it's completely separate from their event management, even though it's the same individual interacting with all of those aspects. It's almost as if they're interacting with three completely different companies. And someone will look at it and go, account management, we've sat down with this guy 5 times over the last year, or event management, we've seen this person, this lady over here twice over the last year, or this person's received 30 emails from us and opened 3. But the real world is one person doing all of those things. And if you can track instead that one person has opened 5 of your emails, clicked 3 links, spoken to you at an expo booth 3 times in the last 12 months, been at 2 of your account management meetings, like they are a golden customer. But it's really hard to break down those silos in tracking. And we found Popl really good for that. Because it tracks, but then it kicks back into your contacts database to then try and align and realize everything. And then, we had HubSpot doing the scoring elements on it.
And so just to kind of close this, because this is something really interesting, and I think that, based off how you're describing it, it sounds like more teams should be using this. So within HubSpot, depending on the score of a customer, does that affect the engagement sequences that they then receive? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. So you can set that up as specific vertical. So you can start to segment on score. So if you want to run an event or if you want to run a competition or a promotion or something for like your top 3% of customers, scoring is a really, really natural way of identifying your top tier or top touch customers. And then to the same extent, you can include lapsed in there. So you can identify your lapsed or lowest tier of customers and then put specific sales implementations in to try and drive activity in those areas. It's a really good way of measuring the pulse of who that customer is and what they're doing over time. And same for, accounts. You can even go into your major accounts and see, right, who are our stakeholders, who are our key engagers at that account, who are our detractors, and it just gives you such a more nuanced view of the world.
Makes sense. And I want to take us into the during event process. So we'll get there very soon, Chris. But the last question that I want to hear from you in terms of pre-event, you talked about 6 months or even before that, before the event, getting a list of who is going to be attending and then engaging with them. What tools are you using to get those lists long before the conference even happens?
So the tools for getting the lists are traditionally like prior attendee databases or prior attendee spreadsheets from the event organizer themselves. We have a tendency, if prior attendee lists are available, then we'll usually go for it. But they're pretty pricey. To be honest, we do invest in a couple of contact databases that are, again, tied into our CRMs. We use website tracking. We use an organization called Lead Forensics for website tracking, who are pretty cool. We use Cognizant as a contact database as well. So we're able to try and find people where they're happy for their details to be shared. Data protection, right, is a tricky one on this because this always comes back to an individual. You're dealing with an individual through this workflow and they don't know you yet. So they can't have explicitly given approval for you to reach out and contact. So it's always a little bit of a struggle to walk that line. But yeah, we'll work with some of our contact databases, website tracking, prior attendees to try and build that overall list. You didn't ask it directly, but I'm going to give a shout out to my favorite feature on Popl on this, which is the ability to actually put the campaigns in place. So for Popl to be able to tie that membership list in and then say who from my company is attending and what date it's on and actually put a date in. Administratively, one of the best features on a database I've ever come across. Like to be able to just set that up 12 months in advance and then just forget you've done it, and then it will apply that campaign tag through on your HubSpots, your Salesforces, and just keep everything in one place. We'll talk about the during and after in a minute, but the campaign piece on Popl was superb. Why more databases don't have that feature in, I do not understand.
Well, we appreciate that. That's why we booked this meeting with you, the podcast. We spoke to you before. You're definitely showing, activity signs of just being a top Popl user. So that's another conversation, but want to move the journey here from the before to the during. You're using tools like HubSpot, Pardo, and Popl to take your lead capture and attribute it. Once you're at the event, aside from the attribution question, which is more of an after the event situation, what is the most challenging part, or what has maybe been the most challenging part until you figured out how to solve it?
Well, it was actually until you figured out how to solve it. The most challenging part was terrible data signal at events. And when we started using Popl, the offline functionality wasn't superb. To give an example on that, a few iterations ago on the app, if you didn't have mobile signal, when you took a photo of someone's business card, it would try and run the AI capture on the business card before it stored the photo. So it would just try and hold it on the AI capture screen. It didn't have data. It would fail to capture the business card. So whilst you've been sat there for 2 minutes looking at your phone, the person who you were talking to is half a friggin' expo hall away, and you've got to run after them, apologize that your tech failed, and then go back and ask for the paper card that you really could have just done right in the first place. We flagged this, and I suspect a lot of other people flagged it as well. And Popl put improvements in on this tail end of last year. Now it's really good. It's really, really good. So now you take the photo. The first thing the app does is it stores the photo in your camera's photo roll. So worst comes to it, you just get back to the hotel at the end of the day and you run the AI upload anyway. And then same again, it'll try and run the AI upload, but it'll very quickly fail, just drop you a note and say that didn't work, but it's fine. You've still got the photo. So yeah, actually the offline, the poor data signal was really hitting us for the first couple we attended. And then huge shout out to the Popl devs. They did some good thinking on that. It's a pretty seamless workflow now.
Yeah, I was say that's really great. Really appreciate you saying that, Chris, because both those things, offline mode and the campaigns, huge team effort for, and to hear that your team is getting direct value from that, that's really amazing to hear. I'm curious with the offline situation, is that at most conferences, is service bad for you guys?
Yeah,
Or
it's
is it
because you've
okay?
got, you saturate the cell tower, right? So you've got, all of a sudden you've got like 10, 12,000 people in a single massed area inside. Even if that area traditionally has good cell reception, you've just added thousands of people's weight onto that cell. So you can get conference Wi-Fi a lot of the time. It's usually garbage or payable. But no, for most of the large conferences we attend, cell phone reception tends to absolutely crap out just because the mass gets saturated.
Yeah. Chris, before Popl, what did that lead capture process look like? Was it completely different? And were there still challenges around it? It sounds like it's helped solve some of your problems, but I'm curious, was it always a problem?
Yeah, it was completely different, actually. We had a couple of marketing tablets with a survey form on them. So really, really standard survey form. And the couple of problems that we found traditionally were, first of all, there were only 2 tablets on the stand. So actually, like, we'd just get queues of people waiting to give their details across. But also they were so inorganic, right? You've got to either start your conversation or end your conversation with, what was your name? And what's your role? And what services is it that you're interested in here today? And do you agree to share your data for advertising purposes with us? And do you work with any of our competitors maybe? And would you like to receive? And it's so artificial, really, really artificial. Exchanging business cards, much more natural, right? Everyone does it, regardless of whether it's electronic or paper. It's a much more natural step in the conversation. So one of the real things that we found was, yeah, we had queues of people waiting to leave their details on marketing tablets. But even just saying that out loud, you can kind of picture how improbable that is. Like, as soon as you get to the second person in that queue, they do not see the value in waiting around anymore just to answer a bunch of forced and impersonal questions with a lead collector at that point. So that was kind of what we did previously, and we'd done the spreadsheet approach and we'd done Microsoft Forms, but they're all roughly variations on the same thing, right? You have a marketing form on stand, people fill it in either electronically or on paper. We'd done things like the competitions where you leave your business card in a bowl to win something, but the quality of leads we always got out of it were just nil. People just want the prize, right? They just take a bunch of business cards, and then the sustainability becomes questionable at that point. That you're just collecting dozens of business cards with minimal interest on just so that they can win a Lego X-Wing or something like that. It's not really got anything to do with anything. So yeah, we tried a couple of things. The marketing list was the main one for us, but it just felt so stunted. It was never satisfactory.
Yeah, so Chris, if you're capturing mainly business cards, are you doing any sort of qualification along with the taking a picture of the card, like in terms of what product they might be interested in or things like that?
I think there's a theoretical answer and a real world answer to that. But the theoretical answer is, yeah, absolutely. We would never take someone's business card without having a lengthy conversation to make sure that there's a real opportunity there. The real world answer is it completely depends on the conversation. We no two ways about it. One of the big reasons we attend expos is lead generation. So there's always a push on get as many contacts, as many cards, as many follow-ups as you can. Just play that numbers game. But you realize pretty quickly that the best reps are the ones that actually take a minute to have a conversation with someone. And they're also the ones that are brave enough to sort of turn around and say, do you know what? There's nothing here. You know, have a great expo. They'll eject someone relatively quickly. The ones who can do this quickly are a joy to behold on that. One of the things I really like on the Popl, I'm going to keep bringing up things I like about Popl. My apologies on that, but those I know, right?
Can you guess who sponsored this episode?
Yeah. The notes section on the lead capture was a really nice touch, and we had one recently where we were at an event, not an expo. We were actually at an industry event in France, and I was chatting away to a couple of people, and one was quite a high potential customer. And he mentioned that he was back in that region again in 2 weeks' time with his family, and that his kids were learning to ski, and that it was his kid's first time on the slopes. And that was just something, once I'd finished the conversation with their card, I could just put that in the notes, because the rep that was going to be getting passed on to had not had that conversation with me. But details matter, right? And just to be able to drop in and say, oh, I believe you're back with your family in a couple of weeks, or how did your kids get on at skiing? It brings a level of warmth that some people don't like it. No two ways about it. But I think most people enjoy the human aspect of business development, and especially like family, most people will talk quite readily. So just the ability to add notes, and then that stays on the contact information. We wouldn't have that on the marketing forms. At no point would we have, what's your role, what's your email address, what products are you interested, how many kids do you have, and do they do skiing? Like, that's completely inappropriate. It's never going to happen. But the ability to sort of add that context is really useful. So yeah, we make good use of that.
It'd be interesting to get sophisticated enough at some point to know that this lead appears to be open to a more personal level of interaction, right? And this one is all business. Don't ever mention their family, kind of thing, and be able to use that as another layer of leverage to engage and form a relationship with the lead.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It sort of ties in with some of the stuff that I'm doing on my doctoral at the moment, and sort of the limits of big data, that sort of thing. I'm not convinced we'll ever get there, because there's so many variables, right? If you think about that, like, yeah, like happy to talk about their family as a checkbox you could have on, but where do you stop? Like shoe size, favorite color, last time they ate in a French restaurant. It's part of why human relationship will kind of always be part of this process, because our memories are ridiculous, right? They'll log that kind of crap. They'll, say, oh, you were going to France to eat at a Michelin star restaurant last time we spoke. How did you enjoy that? That's the sort of thing that'll stick in a human memory so easily, so vividly. There would be no possible reason to log that on a Salesforce record or on something on AI, without just becoming an Orwellian state where we just record every conversation and then send it through a data transcript. So I kind of agree with you. It would be interesting, but also we're pretty evolved machines ourselves. Like, I don't think we ever need to truly find reasons to replace people for that type of thing.
Yeah. I guess it speaks to the quality of just finding good people for your team, building a good team.
Definitely, I'm really envious. I am envious of, but like good business development people that just remember people. I'm so envious of them. I'm not great with names, faces, details, that sort of thing, and I think the salespeople far better. Probably the reason I do bids and tenders more than anything, right? I deal well with project numbers and scope descriptions. Yeah, like salespeople that could just recall personal details like that. I'm really envious. That's a skill. It's a real skill.
It absolutely is. And Chris, I want to ask a question here that's going to take us into the final stage of the post-event process. Let's talk about going from that in-person interaction to a meeting, to a demo. Are you ever scheduling that meeting with the lead right on the conference floor? Or does that something that happens after the lead ends in your CRM and then maybe have some email or an automatic scheduling? What does that look like?
It's pretty. We don't do a huge amount of that sort of demo side of things. Guess a couple of reasons. Because we do people and property protection. We do CCTV cameras. Either there's actually a unit on stand that we can talk people through. So we've kind of got the real world equivalent on stand there for them sometimes. Or other way round, the people we're meeting have a portfolio of like 150 sites across the UK, and actually they need 40 sites at any one time. So we don't really do like in-room demos. Our stuff doesn't lend to it, but that's pretty specific in this case. In terms of booking follow-ups or sort of closing opportunities, no, I would say at Expo, almost all of our stuff tends to be early to mid conversation, as opposed to like, come along and let's get the DocuSign done, or, you know, come along and see the kit and we'll have the contract ready for you. We never really see that so much in our workflow.
Gotcha. So I guess then walk us through what that process looks like, where after that lead does land in Salesforce and or HubSpot, what's happened to it?
Yeah, so we've got a very talented lead generation team. So we categorize our leads first. So we give all of our salespeople 3 days to identify any leads where they had a real personal relationship with them, right? They don't want to see generic marketing emails going out to people, something like that. So our salespeople get a couple of days to identify any of the leads where they want to say, right, no, I'm doing the follow-up call on that instead. And then as long as the remainder that aren't identified, a demand generation team will start to push those through a qualification process. So they'll first of all do a mass mail out and say, thanks very much for coming and seeing us on stand. Thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. We'd love to find out more about what you need. Right, so this is kind of assuming that there was no pre-existing knowledge there. Otherwise, it gets bumped into that what we call tier one, that hands-on from the salesperson instead. So then demand generation will sort of send out a first, second, third, fourth email over a number of weeks. We usually go about 6 weeks after the event, something like that, and sort of stagger across those 6. And they'll just try and, get an initial call set up. So our demand generation team does the initial qualification. They'll reach out and say, hey, we'd love to find out more about your business. Have you got 10 minutes just to set up? So we do a really light qualification first. Tell us who you are, what you do, why you possibly might need our services. Our demand generation team are really good at that sort of, in bids, we would call it a no-go, right? We would say it's a non-qualified. So they look to try and steer it down one of those 2 pathways, right? Is this a conversation that might possibly go somewhere down the line? Or is this more they drop their business card in to try and find the Lego X-Wing or whatever it was. So demand generation are essentially an outbound sales team. They'll do email and sales. They'll try and spend about 4 or 6 touch points with this customer trying to get in touch. If they manage this email back or this 10-minute phone call and they feel like there's some good opportunity there, if the customer's looking for something that we can provide, if we think, we this is more my bid industry hat on instead, but bid industry, we look for 4 qualification items of, is it real? Do we want it? Can we win it? Can we deliver it? Is it real, right? Are they just in bed with one of our competitors? Have they worked with another company for 10 years? And our demand generation team are really good at getting that information. Do you have someone doing this already? Is there really any mileage in this conversation? Or are you just price checking us, or are you just scoping out the competition? Is it real? Can we win it? Is this a service that you want? Is this something that you've bought that you actually want to buy? Do we want it? This is probably more into the sales, the second qualification stage at that point is, can we price it effectively? Are they a customer that sounds so impersonal, but do they have a good credit rating? Like, when we deliver services, are we going to get paid at the end of it? Can we be confident in them as a customer? And then can we deliver it is that idea of, if they come back to us and say, right, we need you to be on site within 5 minutes, no matter where we put a call in from, you're all right. Thanks. We'll find it. You can find someone else on that. We're pretty fast, but some customers have unbelievable expectations. But the bigger picture on that is are you looking for a service that we can deliver well? And ultimately, there's a good relationship there between the 2 of us. So our demand generation team kind of takes the first 2 on that. Is it real and can we win it? Are we being price checked? Are we being market checked? Is there a customer and long-term relationship on that? No. Cool, right? There's something here. What they'll do then is they'll schedule a follow-up with one of our sales specialists. Ideally, within 1 conversation, they'll look to close an opportunity. Depending on the size and complexity, that might push out to 4 or 6 conversations, probably, for our standard sales operations. My world over in bids and tenders now, you're looking at, sometimes 2 years on this stuff. That is really where the repeat touch points on Popl and the CRM systems comes in, that, we'll come back and say, right, you've got a £1 million framework, love to be on it, but that's not going to come up until 2027. Cool, we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep dropping you a message every 3 to 6 months, keep finding out if there is a demo or a test site we can get in touch with. But we'll constantly be setting tasks in the background. I think I've worked for other companies where there's been this whole, right, there's no business there 6 weeks after an expo, so we just close that lead down. Orbis is very different. We have some really long-term relationships with customers, and we are really heavily like public framework based as well. So yeah, some opportunities for us have years worth of tail on them. We don't want that to be average. We want average tail to be much lower than that, especially after an expo. But the ability to differentiate that post expo is really important. So that's kind of what we're flowing them.
Makes sense. Yeah, lots to unpack there. Very obviously complex before, during, and after. So we appreciate you walking us through that. We want to take a moment here. This should probably come as no surprise that today's episode is sponsored by Popl. So they've asked us to do a special lightning round segment. If you're interested, what this is we just ask a couple of quick questions. You can answer them with no context, just boom, boom, boom. You can give context if you want. But you ready to do the lightning round with Popl?
Yeah, and unlike all the previous ones, I'm going to cap my answers at like 15 seconds rather than giving you War and Peace every time.
Okay. Well, then I have a challenge for you because this one's probably going to be tough for you to cap. You're obviously a very intellectual guy. It's the year 2075. We're at a conference. What is the experience look like? What's the difference between today and 2075?
We're not in the same room. This is an easy one, actually. So one of my previous company, we did a massive international academic conference, and it was virtual based. It was all online. But because it was PC screen, it wasn't immersive, right? So you can go on, and they'd made it pretty good. You could track the mouse around and see different stands, and they had AI avatars on there. I think Apple Vision, and I think Meta, and I think Surface, I can't remember what Microsoft's one is called, but I think the ability to augment reality, I think the ability to just put on an AR headset and to walk up to people and shake them by the hand, for me, that is massively going to change how we do conferences, especially in light of flying hundreds or thousands of people across to other continents, right? The climate change piece is massively going to change coming up. So for me, the big difference is simple. Like, we'll get an in-conference feel, but we won't be in the same room. And I think that's going to be pretty cool.
Crazy. The future is coming fast. Ryan, next one.
Let's do it. Chris, can you tell us about your most memorable conference experience? This could be a good one or a bad one.
Most memorable conference experience. I've been lucky enough to speak a couple of times at some conferences, and that's always it's always a lot of fun, a lot of work putting it together. I've got my dad to thank for this one, actually, but I did science communication many years ago. And I'm a pretty talkative guy, and a lot of people say, especially like before conference, do you get nervous? How do you deal with stage fright? And for me, and this is my dad's advice always, is you never deal with stage fright, and that's because if you don't care about something enough to get butterflies in advance for it, then you don't care enough, right? You should be nervous before a job interview. You should be nervous before picking up a phone to a customer. You should be nervous before getting up on stage. It's because you care at that point. Like, you should be looking for the absence of stage fright. If you're not a little bit scared, don't do it. You don't care at that point. So I think for me, sort of those two or three that I've presented at, I think they're probably my most memorable. My first one especially, I did a presentation on design fundamentals in bids and tenders, and I must have had 15, 20 people in the room, and they'd scheduled me on the main stage. So this room held like 400 people. And I had like 20 people. And as always with an audience, like, they went, everyone, I'm like, guys, no, come on. You've got to bunch up in front of me for this, please. Like, you're killing me. It was good. I ended up, I wrote that one really badly. I got good feedback for it, but I took like half the allotted time. I learned from that failure. But yeah, those are probably my most memorable, is where I've been lucky enough to engage with an audience and to speak. I like those.
That's awesome. So to wrap us up, if you could choose one piece of advice or a lesson for an up-and-coming event marketer who's in charge of finding success at conferences, making sure that we're getting the most out of every handshake, what would it be? What would you leave the audience with?
Is the exact opposite of the question you've just asked, and that is find out what failure is acceptable, because you are not going to nail success except by getting some stuff wrong. But there are massive gradients of what is allowable to get wrong, and you need to ask some pretty straightforward and direct questions of your manager, of your senior stakeholders, to find out what their criteria for success is and like what is allowable failure. And anyone that turns around to you and goes, oh, don't worry about failure, this is going to be an next success, don't listen to them. They are of no use to you whatsoever, right? So that's just a completely unrealistic approach, is to assume that everything's going to be a success. We learn by getting things wrong. You have to accept that failure is going to be part of your process along the way somehow, but that failure should never be big enough or visible enough that it scuppers you or it's detrimental or something like that. So my advice is work closely with managers and with stakeholders that you trust. Ask uncomfortable questions. Be open to the fact that failure is going to be part of your process, and look for ways to avoid that failure at the beginning. But most importantly, work to understand which failures are kind of allowable or avoidable and which failures are an absolute no-go. Because that's something that most of us only learn by actually getting big stuff wrong through our career. And you can absolutely use the wisdom and the experience of other people to help try and speed that up.
I love that. You know, it's amazing you mentioned that, Chris. Bryce and I have even chatted a little bit, and we've taken this to the extreme where sometimes we talk about optimizing for failure, because you're spot on. And a lot of times it's from those failures. That's where you learn and that's where you grow the most. And if you're not encountering a failure every now and then, you know, it's a sign that maybe you're not growing as fast as you could be.
Undue optimism is the enemy of success, as far as I'm concerned. Like anyone that just turns around and goes, it'll be fine on the day, like they are the last person I'm putting on my team. No chance. I want people that are going to obsess over detail, that are going to stay up overnight worrying about the little things that are going to go wrong, because they're the ones that are going to make damn sure it works on.
Amazing. Well, great stuff, Chris. Really big thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights on how your team manages the lead capture process all the way from the beginning through to the end. We've learned a ton. I hope that everyone listening has learned a ton.
Chris, so thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom and your experience. Where can our audience go to follow you or your company, any projects you're working on, or anybody you want to shout out?
Yeah, absolutely. So our company, you can go to orbisprotect.com, and I think you guys will put that in with the comments on it, but that's ORBIS, Orbis. So anyone looking for property or site protection services in the UK and across Europe, look us up. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Always happy to meet up with people on LinkedIn and to share ideas. And also a big shout out to my native industry of bids and tender management, the Association of Proposal Management Professionals. It's an underrepresented job across the world, and if anyone's considering answering long questionnaires for a living, they would benefit from looking up the APMP. So those three are always good to look up.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. This has been an absolute pleasure. We've learned so much. We know the audience has too. Thanks for joining us here on the Networker podcast, and we're looking forward to talking more soon.